Thank you very much, and I'm grateful to you for if one looks at the subject and the way it's presented. Uh, I think it's important to understand the context, and I mean I've been of this view for quite some time. I mean, way back in the 1990s, for example, 1996, then again the 98 election, etc. I used to point out that certain political parties, I mean, the then ruling party, the Congress party, and all that, they were essentially adopting a policy which was similar to that of the Muslim League in the pre independence era, of essentially behaving as though they were only concerned about the minorities and without any kind of concern for the majority. So I've been of this view for quite some time. And I want to say very clearly that I am an unapologetic supporter of secularism. I don't believe that there should be any differentiation between people of different religions. I personally do not really see much of a difference between people of one religion or the other. Human beings are human beings. There are different types of human beings. But to classify human beings on the basis of religion and then lump them all into a particular type, I think that is somewhat unscientific. And I think it takes away a lot of the, if I may say so, the possibilities and the joy of human interaction. So I want to say that I'm speaking as someone who's a believer in secularism. And which is why I've been saying that, look, I mean, what we are seeing now, and if you let's go back to the context. Let's go back, for example, to where the entire situation started. In my view, the drive for the partition of India, and if I may say so, the community that has been most affected by this partition has been the Muslim community, for the simple reason there would have been 500 million Muslims in a united Indian subcontinent. If you did not have a partition, you would have had 500 million Muslims, which is almost about, say, more than 40% of the world's Muslim population. It would have been an immense force. Even the number that we have now, nearly about 200 million, I mean, to call it a minority, or to say, for example, as some people are saying, I mean, especially Wahhabis, that they are in danger, that it's an endangered minority. I mean, 20 million people cannot be an endangered minority. 200 million people, a minority or an endangered minority, well, I think that defies logic, to be frank with you. So I've been looking at it in my own way. And, I have one particular habit, which is that I'm not particularly bothered about the comments that come about me, the trolling, for example, or the other kind of thing. I'm not particularly bothered about the labels that are put, that are basically affixed to me. And I mean, some of the labels have been a bit humorous from my point of view. People are most welcome to put the labels. What I want to say, I am not sure that anybody can allege that the Hindu population basically was discriminating towards Muslims and oppressed Muslims during the Mughal period. I'm not sure that anyone can make a reasonable case for that. I'm not sure that anybody can make a reasonable case that the Hindu population was oppressing Christians and basically dealing in a very beastly way with Christians during the British period. In fact, pardon me for saying so, but during that period, the temple lands were taken over, temples were taken over, and large tracts of land were handed over for houses of worship of the Christian community. And you have got some very beautiful churches. I mean, I've gone to some of them. I've attended prayers in some of them, and I find they're really beautiful. And of course, some of the parishes have started selling the land. Otherwise, you had very wide areas of open land in the heart of our cities. So there was no Hindu oppression during the Mughal period. There was no Hindu oppression during the British period. And during the Hindu period, well, if there was oppression, it was oppression against other Hindus, because there were no Christians and there were no Muslims during that particular period. So that is the first point I'd like to make. Having said that, I'd like to say that therefore the question of quote unquote guilt, the question of recompense, moral, ethical, policy wise, it doesn't arise because the offense is not there. If you don't have an offense, then I don't see the reason for a kind of a punishment or whatever it is for the offense. It's not there. So this is the point I'd like to make. The point is that in my view, the drive for a separate Pakistan took momentum when a decision was taken by some of the giants of the Indian freedom movement to support the Khilafat agitation. Now, Turkey under Kemal Ataturk became a state which is a secular state. And by a secular state, I mean a state that basically imbibed what I believe to be the core teachings of the Holy Quran, which is compassion, mercy, beneficence, and that kind of an approach. In many parts of the world, Islam did not spread because of the sword. It spread because of the perception that the societies in which people were living in did not offer many people a way out. They were perennially, in a sense, almost from birth, condemned to a life of inferiority, condemned to what, my old friend Kanshiram used to say, a horizontal view of society, in which you have people at the top, people at the bottom, and people in between. Whereas what is needed is a vertical view of society, when what is needed is a horizontal view in which people are different, but people are equal. It's not the sword. It was that kind of perception. Just as, for example, when the Greek armies prevailed over the Persians, it was because the Greeks saw themselves as free citizens, and the Persian conscripts were slaves of the Persian king. Now, when you have a situation in which you have a perception of slavery, or being a conscript, or being forced into conflict, and I think we are seeing that now on the border with China, the Chinese troops are essentially conscripts. The Indian troops are free people in a democracy, and they're fighting for their country. The Chinese are not fighting for their country, they're fighting for the leadership of the Communist Party, which is a very, very different thing indeed. From that time onwards, I would say, the momentum came for partition. Now, then after 15th of August 1947, the country became free. And I think our leaders were right from the first second, they were there, they held office, and they spoke about this magnificent change that has come to India, which is a really remarkable change, because India was, in a sense, the harbinger of freedom movements and independence in Africa, large parts of Asia, and in many other locations. But having said that, I'd like to say that subsequently, if you're a secular society, then essentially you do not discriminate between people of any religion. You don't discriminate between people who are belonging to the Hindu or the Christian or the Muslim or any other religion. But if you have constructs in which there is a clear difference between them and a difference in terms of policy, essentially it's a double partition. You first partition the country territorially, and now you're partitioning the country in terms of differentiating for policy people of different faiths. Now, as I said, I am a firm believer in the rule of law. I'm a firm believer in following law, and whether the law is, in my view, a just law or not, whether the law is a necessary law or not. Well, a law is a law and you have to follow it. But I would only like to point out that, the system that was created, in which there was a clear differentiation between so-called majority and minority. And again, I'd like to say, scientifically, if you talk about the so-called Hindu majority and the so-called, minority, or the Muslim minority, or in that kind of thing, well, the reality is there are so many minorities within the minority, and there are so many majorities within the majority, and minorities within the majority, and majorities within the minority, that if you're a sociologist, or if you've got any kind of ground level experience, of people following a particular faith, it's very difficult to recognize the undifferentiated mass that was created as a result of policy. Now, you have, weird policies across the world. Bill Clinton was, clearly, a very interesting human being. He tried very hard to get India to surrender Kashmir to Pakistan. He tried very hard to give China a nuclear monopoly in Asia, but he still celebrated in India. And whenever he or Hillary Clinton come, they're lionized, and they're lionized as good friends of India. Well, anyway, that's a different point. I simply want to say that these may have made sense in a pre-partition situation to try and avoid partition by essentially convincing some members of the minority community that you're perfectly safe in a future India. So once India becomes free, there will be specific laws, in which the minority is given protection, the minority is treated separately. All that will be done so that there's no need for you to go on to the Jinnah Churchill bandwagon of partition. You can, you please retain your faith in an undivided subcontinent. Geopolitically, an undivided subcontinent would have been a very, very different situation from what we are facing now. And certainly the loss of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir to India, to the Union, is a very major geopolitical problem that we are facing. There are other issues also, but I'm not going to raise them here because, frankly, that's not the subject of the talk. What I would like to say is that from 15th August 1947 and over the years thereafter, when our legal structure was constituted, you have partitioned the society into so-called majority and minority and taught it to continue in the belief that these are separate parts that are no relation to each other. I'm not the smartest person, in a room or whatever it is. It doesn't make any sense to me, frankly, to have this kind of a separation, because I've got friends who are Christian, I've got friends who are Muslim, I've got friends who are Parsi, who are Sikh, who are Jain, who are Buddhist, and of course who are Hindu. And I'm not sure that I or anybody else will basically, Christian should treat differently. Muslim, my God, treat differently. A Hindu, no, I don't think so. You treat people as human beings. So this construct would have been effective, possibly in preventing partition. I personally don't believe it would have been effective. I think what would have been effective was a clear reiteration of the policy of secularism, that religion will play no part in policy at all. I think what the French call, and I got atrocious French, only a few words of French, laïcité or something like that, which is very hard-nosed kind of secularism in which everybody is treated equally. It is not happening in France, it's not happening in Europe, it's not happening there, but at least it's a concept which I personally believe is a good concept. So you have this partitioning of people that has begun from and very importantly, this identification of the Muslim community with its most radical segment. Now, this is something which media, academics, and populations that are not Muslim have frequently adopted. And I think part of the reason could be that the Wahhabis were extremely convenient to the British colonial power, and later on to the Americans who took over from the British colonial power. Initially, Wahhabism was used against Turkey, the hold of Turkey over the Hijaz and over the Arab world, that the Turks were not, quote unquote, true Muslims, and only Wahhabis are quote unquote genuine believers. So it was used very effectively by the British, this creed, which was basically thought up by Abdul Wahab, and he formed an alliance with the Al Saud family. Subsequently, it was used against Arab nationalists. You had people like Gamal Abdel Nasser, you had Ahmed bin Bella, you had various other people, a very strong, and if you talk in terms of Iran, you had, for example, Mossadegh in Iran, a true nationalist. Now, these nationalists, of course, Mossadegh It was not Wahhabi. It's a question of it was different kind of this thing. So I'm not putting Mossadegh there. I'm talking about the Arab world. It was used as a weapon against Arab nationalists who were essentially challenging Western domination. At that time, it was not Western primacy. You have Western dominance, you have Western primacy, and then you have among, in a sense, a Western frontrunner kind of situation. So the level of control goes down. The level of, if I may say so, directioning of other societies goes down over time. But Western dominance was sought to be protected from Arab nationalists. Subsequently, of course, we know what happened, the Afghan war. I've said this other times. I think it bears repeating for the few who have not heard it. The United States sublet that particular war to the Pakistan military, which from the time of Ziaul Haq, about 15, 16, 18 years before the Afghan war got into full swing, it became an army which Wahhabism. It was an army which was the sword arm of Wahhabism. It's got jihad as its motto, and it's not jihad as in the Muslim texts, where essentially jihad is an internal battle to improve yourself. It's not an external battle. It's a different kind of, it's a Wahhabi kind of jihad, which is essentially intolerance towards anybody who doesn't agree with you and your precepts. Look, you had the Pashtun, a huge Pashtun majority who were moderate. And you had a small Pashtun minority that was fanatic. And the Pakistanis made sure this fanatic minority was armed, equipped, trained, and given a lot of money. And unfortunately, a lot of the problems of the world that we are seeing now were caused by that extremely wrong decision, which was, in a sense, doubled down upon after 9/11, when Bush and Cheney decided once again to go and choose Pakistan as the country of choice, the Pakistan army as the instrument of choice against the Taliban, when it was the military that defended the Taliban, and to give credit to the Pakistan military, continued to defend the Taliban, and now is pushing forward the Taliban. Again, the United States made that mistake. At that point in time, Jaswant Singh certainly came forward. George Fernandez came forward and said, look, we are there. We are a very strong force. We'll help you. That would have been a game changer, even in terms of improving the overall geopolitical atmosphere and removing religious extremism and fundamentalism from several important parts of the world. But no, Cheney and Bush said, nothing doing. We are going back to our Wahhabi friends. Well, that's a different matter. Anyway, the freedom movement went to Wahhabism and ignored the immense majority of Muslims who are completely moderate and who, frankly, are not in the least attracted to Wahhabism. I mean, Wahhabis are people who say if you don't dress in a particular way, you're not a good Muslim. If you don't talk in a particular way, if you don't hate other people, you're not a good Muslim. In other words, you can't function in any kind of society except where you have Wahhabism. And the societies where Wahhabis are in control are societies which are in clear meltdown and where millions of people, including hundreds of thousands of Wahhabis, are anxious to get away. And this is happening because of the influx from Libya, from Syria, and from various other places. These are things that I've been writing about for some time. But all I want to say is this, that look, in India, this policy, which we call secularism, is a policy in which you are essentially, in a sense, discriminating differently to the Hindu majority for reasons which are not clear to me. There must be some good reason. These were all brilliant people. And like I said, the law is the law and we must obey the law. But maybe there was some period in Mughal history in which Hindus were oppressing the Muslims. And in fact, it was really not the Mughals who were in charge, Hindus were in charge. Maybe there was some period in British history in which the Christians were being oppressed. Maybe the British were only, nominally in charge. I think possibly the Hindus were in charge. And they're the ones who decided, let's take over the temple lands. Let's do all this. Let's do all that. I don't know, maybe. But in any case, I'd like to say, frankly, that in my view, this is the root of what I may say is what is described as so-called Hindu assertion. It's not Hindu assertion. It's simply an identification of a majority as a majority. Now, you can say the same assertion in Bahrain, where you have a Shia majority and they're asserting themselves. It's natural, it's not toxic. You have that assertion in Iran. Iran is plainly a state where Shia Islam is in the ascendant. It's certainly not Sunni Islam, and very definitely not Wahhabi Islam, which is at the throat of Shia Islam, because the Wahhabis consider Shia to be apostate, and they consider moderates to be close to apostasy. But the Shia are apostates, and they're the only thing that they feel a good individual should do to an apostate. I don't want to talk about it, but it basically is population control. So what I want to say is that this, ultimately what has happened is, across all these decades, you have now a whole lot of people who honestly believe that they are secularists. Now, I'd like to say that when I heard President Xi Jinping's speech, and I want to say very clearly, I've gone to China multiple times. I've met the people who are very much part of the Xi Jinping network. They're outstanding people, brilliant minds. So I'd like to say I've got very high respect for them. But the reality is, when Xi Jinping says that China is not an expansionist power, China is actually a very benign power, that China is really not interested in any territorial expansion, he really believes it. People, and millions of people in the Communist Party really believe it. Now, the difficulty therefore comes when you start believing in your own myths. And part of the myth is that unless you have a society in which the majority community is subject to discriminatory laws, and in which the majority is treated the way minorities are treated in several parts of the world, which is essentially laws that discriminate against them, well, this is not a healthy society, and this is not secularism. Now, you talk to people, and I know, for example, I'll just give you an example. Which happened to me. I was making almost the same arguments that I'm making to you now. Maybe 10 or 15 years ago to the India International Center with a former colleague from the Times of India. And the man, he turned red, he turned angry. He said, "You're a horrible Hindu fundamentalist. You're almost, I would almost call you an extremist and a terrorist. I can't sit in the same table with you." And he leapt across and went 2 tables across. All I had said was that, in my view, laws should not discriminate between people of any community, and laws should be equal of different communities. If that is an act if that is an action that is susceptible to the term terrorism, well, I was guilty. But I'm only saying this is a good human being, a very fine human being. We have worked as colleagues for many years in the Times of India. I respect him, I respect his mind. But he honestly believes that a construct that discriminates is secularism. So we have this concept of secularism in India, which has been discriminatory from day one. Now, I'm not going to go into conspiracy theories about various things, such as, for example, the very tragic assassination of the father of the nation. I have written about it some time ago, because based on some conversations I had as a very young individual with a very, very noble human being, who, by the way, his column was stopped in the Times of India by a very liberal and a very democratic prime minister called Jawaharlal Nehru. And he was telling me that the Gandhi assassination plot and the people who were responsible for it, the intelligence services had a clear picture about that, and they did nothing. Now, almost before anything happened, almost as soon as this terrible deed was done, Mountbatten said it was a Hindu who did it. And in a sense, that horrible, indefensible action is in a sense used to morally justify a whole lot of perceptions, a whole lot of activity, a whole lot of actions that kind of try and put a collective guilt on the Hindu community for the clearly horrible actions of a few people who did this terrible thing against the father of the nation. Absolutely unpardonable thing against the father of the nation. I'm not going to, this gentleman who was in the ICS, he told me this. He had tears in his eyes when he told me this. And he said, this is what was done. And, he said that Mountbatten knew, the British knew, the Secret Service knew. They did not tell Patel. He said, I don't know if they told the Prime Minister. They certainly did not tell the Home Minister. They did not tell those in the police who were Indian. They kept it to themselves and they allowed this horrible act to take place. Now, whether it's true or not, or just a conspiracy, we never know, because frankly, our history, we call our history as myth of thousands of years ago. Let me tell you, it's not only thousands of years ago that history has been, that now myth has become history. Previously, history was turned into myth. Now, myth is being turned into history. And that is the kind of thing that we are being taught. So these kind of possibilities that are there are never really seriously entertained as to why certain things happen, how they happen. Whether it is, this or assassinations or for certain policies or whatever it is, we don't know, because as I said, our history is actually, in some respects, the history that we are taught has become a collection of myths. But anyway, so what I want to say is very clear. I believe in a moderate society. I believe in a society in which everybody works together. Ultimately, I believe that the Indian subcontinent should have a kind of a situation in which you have a European Union kind of situation, in which you have open borders, not only the Indian subcontinent, but all across. Because I see, and I've said this for about 30 years, frankly, and way back, I had mentioned this, I had given some lectures over it, including to some, when I had gone to Germany in the mid-90s. So it's like an eagle. So one wing of the eagle is in Southeast Asia. One wing of the eagle is in West Asia, etc. The head is into Tibet, frankly, and it's there very much into Tibet. And the talons are there across the Indian Ocean, right straddling the Indian Ocean. That's the way, but I don't see this as control. I don't see this as domination. I see this as influence. I see this as and I think that is the most important part of civilization, that you don't try and dominate by physical force, because that kind of domination is like a spring. You put it together, and the minute you relax your hand, the spring goes back. You don't dominate. You change minds. You persuade. And I think that is the strength of ancient India and ancient Indian philosophy. I'd like to say that again, back in the 1990s, in the Times of India, when we were having this kind of a debate and a discussion, I could see that this policy of basically adopting the Muslim League's policy by parties that were supposed to be enemies of Muslim League was having a reaction on Indian society of all different faiths. And it is, in a sense, creating walls and separations between society. And at that point in time, I'd like to say, from that point in time, I've been very, very clear about this, that we have to ensure that there is a genuine kind of secularism in India. And that genuine secularism means equal treatment of people of all faiths. But regrettably now, so deep has this peculiarly post-independence concept of secularism seeped into the psyche of so many people that they're confusing this for secularism. And they're misinterpreting this, with the result that anything other than discrimination against Hindus is seen as oppression of minorities. And so now you have this situation in which all over the world now, people are, friends of mine, I would like to say I have immense respect for the New York Times. I know people at fairly elevated levels in that paper. I've got immense respect for other newspapers, for other of these things. They honestly believe that there are pogroms, that there is genocide in India. It's not that they think it's an exaggeration. They honestly believe that. Now, I mean, in this age of the smartphone, surely if there's a pogrom somewhere, somebody would have survived and taken a snapshot of that. If there is a mass killing of certain communities, it would have been reflected in some data. I don't see this happening in the country. I go on the roads, I don't see people being butchered and put to death. And then I go I have discussions, these days it's virtual. I have discussions with friends in the United States, I have discussions with friends in Europe, and they tell me what is happening in India. There's genocide, there's mass murder, the minorities are being completely destroyed. What on earth is going on? I mean, what can I tell them? And honestly, they don't believe me because they say X, Y, Z, B, A, B, C. All of them are saying, no, this is happening. Now, I've seen a lot of reports. I've seen a lot of writings that this is happening. I've seen speeches that this is happening. I would like these people, again, many of them are very good personal friends of mine. Personal friends for a very long time. I'm not going to name them here, but I'd like to say that I have immense regard for them. And they've been good friends and they are good friends. Please tell us where this genocide is taking place. Tell us where these mass murders are taking place. Because I remember in the past, Hillary Clinton spent a lot of money trying to discover mass graves in Gujarat. And ultimately, there was great excitement. A bunch of bones were discovered, and it turned out they were bones of buffaloes, not human beings. So when the bones were analyzed in a laboratory, Hillary Clinton didn't get the money that she spent. I mean, all that great effort of trying to find, mass graves in Gujarat completely collapsed, frankly. And in Gujarat, what happened was terrible. But I'd like to say, I don't believe that Prime Minister Modi, a chief minister at that time, was complicit in it. About 1/3 of the people who died were Hindus. A lot of policemen died. And I mean, to my way of thinking, and I may be wrong, essentially the killing became a fight between two mafias. The mafia of one community which used to control the illicit liquor trade versus the mafia of another community that used this particular occasion to finish off that particular mafia and take over the trade for themselves. I'm not a believer in prohibition, I can tell you. I think it's ridiculous to go in for prohibition. It creates mafias. In Haryana, for example, I mean, mafias strengthened after Bansilal foolishly went and introduced prohibition. I am a person who does not believe that government should start regulating behavior, whether it is on diet, whether it's on lifestyle, whether it's on dress, or any of these things. I'm very clear about that, because then what happens is it becomes, many people then, the law then becomes such that it ceases to be effective in very large part. We need less law and more effective law. So please understand where I'm coming from. But I'd only like to say that I'm convinced that this was no genocide. It was a fight between two mafias in which, unfortunately, a lot of innocent people, both Hindus and Muslims, got killed. But the story everywhere is that it was almost like a Nazi kind of pogrom. And that story has taken wings. There's no attempt at it's not, a few thousand. No, hundreds of thousands. And some people actually told me 3 million, 6 million people died during that time. Now, these are reasonable people who have got, postgraduate degrees, who have done their doctorates. Where have they got this from? And then they give me some email by somebody who says, actually several million people died. And then that person called me on the phone and said it was nearly 6 million. Well, I mean, if it is 6 million, for God's sake, show me the proof. So I'd only like to say that it's now become the received wisdom that any kind of an effort to equalize the field between majority and minority is seen as almost genocide. If not physical genocide, then cultural genocide, religious genocide in which you eliminate a religion and all that kind of thing. Whereas, I'm sorry, I don't believe that. In fact, I firmly believe that if this kind of, if I may say so, equal treatment of faiths does not take place, I think we are going to see more social tension. And this is something which all of us would like to avoid, because we don't want social tension. I would like to applaud this government for the very close relations it has got with the Middle East, the very close relations it has got with the Buddhist countries of Southeast Asia, with the very close relationship it has got with the Christian countries of Europe and North America. Very, very close relations. Prime Minister Modi. And this is a gentleman who is, I mean, some part of that is because, frankly, of the communication strategy or lack of it, of some of the people around. I think been extremely clumsy communication, in the sense that the people who are sent there are people who talk to, if I may say so, audiences that are already, believers and I mean, not only believers but hardcore believers. Well, those who you don't need to convince a hardcore believer. But when you go and try to convince a hardcore believer in the opposite fact, then you are obviously not the right person to do that. And you can see that it's not happening across the world. The world's largest democracy is being called all kinds of names, and a genuine belief has taken place, which in my view is very dangerous, because when we are facing this authoritarian power, when we are facing this Wahhabi assault on terrorism, etc., we need the support of global society. We need the support of Southeast Asia, of West Asia, of Europe, of North America. And this kind of misperception of India, of the people in charge in India, of policies in India, is extremely, in my view, disturbing and needs to change. I would like to say, I'd like to just, before we open this question, a final point. I again say, I am very aggressively a secularist. My mother converted to Islam, and I'm sorry to say that all kinds of weird theories were floated as to why she converted. I know that many, many, many years before her formal declaration, she stopped going to temples. She started, reciting, the prayers of the Islamic faith. And she started going out here and there in burqa. Some of her close friends who are writers have written about it. I mean, we have two adopted brothers who are Muslim, and she adopted them, and she used to read the Quran and things to them. I don't know how that happened, but it happened. Her final instructions were to my wife and to my brother's wife: do not burn me. I want to be buried. Both of them communicated that to me when I returned. I was not there when she had her final moments. I held her hand, and then I left for a particular place. When I came back, late at night, I was told she's no longer there. And both my wife as well as my sister-in-law told me this was her command. As the eldest son, I obeyed that command. And I can tell you the amount of abuse that I have endured, the amount of abuse that my mother has endured. And I'd like to say, people who say that she was weak, I mean, she was dominated by some 30-year-old or 50-year-old or 60-year-old or bearded or non-bearded. Look, this was a fiercely independent person. And Manusmriti says that when you are a lady, you first obey your father, then you obey your husband, then you obey your son. My mother did not obey her father. She did not obey her husband. And I can tell you, as the elder son, she never obeyed me. And I'd like to say I'm very proud of her, and I celebrate that fact, because I do believe that any human being has got the right to autonomy, and that for ladies as well as for males as well as for females. So I'd only like to say, it's a little, it's almost humorous when you make this kind of comment about Kamala Das, whose record of independence and fierce pride goes over several decades, and you do this kind of thing. But so I've been subject to a lot of trolling and a lot of abuse by, if I may say so, people who claim to champion the Hindu cause. I've also been subject to a lot of trolling by people who claim to champion the Muslim cause, because I've been for a long time a believer that Narendra Modi is a very good leader for India. And if I may say so, the only problem is that sometimes some of his, he may not always have some of the people who he needs, but I can tell you, this is a person of the people, and this is a person who wants a better India. I've always believed in that, and that's been made me the subject of a fair amount of abuse. But I've made one statement several times, And I'd be happy that very few people in, even so-called secularists have basically attacked that statement or cast doubt on my secularism. And that is that, look, the Hindu religion, there are three holy sites of the Hindus: Kashi, Mathura, and Ayodhya. Now, the Christians have got Bethlehem. They have got the Vatican for Catholics. That's very, very good. The Jewish people have got Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, as they call it in the Hebrew language. They have Yerushalayim. The Muslims have got the great cities of Makkah and Medina. These are the three holy sites of the Hindus. Now, all that I am saying is restore them to what they were before Aurangzeb destroyed them. And Aurangzeb then not only destroyed them, he flouted some of the basic tenets of the Muslim faith by building mosques on them. Please go back to what they were before Aurangzeb had his way with them. And Aurangzeb, by the way, not coincidentally, was the Mughal emperor who saw the collapse of the Mughal empire. That is what Aurangzeb did. He was the destroyer of the Mughal empire. And these three holy sites of the Hindus, is it so horribly unreasonable that they should be given these three holy sites back? I mean, there are crazy people who talk about 40,000, 50,000, 70,000. Just these three sites, in my view, will cool down a lot of the perception of neglect and discrimination that is there in the psyche of many people in the majority community. And if I may say so, they have that perception, and it need not be a perception. It could be a different thing altogether. But what has been, we have seen in Ayodhya, even today, it's regarded as extremely unreasonable that you build a Ram temple there. Kashi, forget about it. Mathura, forget about it. Why? Was Aurangzeb then the exemplar of secularism? Was he the exemplar of secularism that you want to basically, retain what Aurangzeb did? And you want to, in a sense, avoid going back to the situation where previous Mughal kings participated. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, in Mathura, the Krishna Janmasthan and the temple there was destroyed twice by invading kings, and each time it was rebuilt under a Mughal king, under a Mughal emperor. It's Aurangzeb who came and destroyed it completely again. And he basically destroyed what was done under Mughals. They were not done under Christian kings. They were not done under Hindu prime ministers. They were done by Mughals. And that is why I'd like to say, let's not be apologetic about Ayodhya, Kashi, and Mathura, because bringing them back to where they were before Aurangzeb had this horrible way with them is, in my view, a very strong guarantee of secularism. Secularism is guaranteed by fair conduct. Secularism is guaranteed by an absence of discrimination. Secularism is guaranteed by complete equality of treatment, irrespective of faith. And I think it's very important for India that these three holy sites be restored to the Hindus. It's not important from the point of view of Hindu fanaticism, but secularism. And I want to end by talking about Hindutva. The cultural DNA of our country is made up of the Vedic, the Mughal, and the Western. I don't want to name a particular leader. He's still there and a great leader who has held high positions. And, I meet him. I met him once and we had a long discussion, and he was telling me how, this whole country has got to be 100% followers of Hinduism. And I noticed that he was eating, something like tandoori chicken, and his daughter was wearing a salwar kurta. These are, look, all this is Mughal culture. And he was speaking to me in English, which is certainly not Vedic and certainly not Mughal. It was British. So my point is, these three strands are there in the DNA of every single one of us. And I can tell you there's no reason to be worried about it. But all I can say is, of these three strands, the last strand has been given a lot of attention in our education system. The second strand has been given some attention. The Vedic strand has been almost completely ignored. I regard the Vedas as history. I regard Ram Setu as an accomplished fact. It has now been confirmed by NASA. And I'm sorry that a BJP government in the past basically wanted this thing to be destroyed for whatever reason. I mean, I'm really sorry about that. I'm sorry that even today temples are completely under state control. And what is happening there? I mean, let me go back to this Padmanabha Swami temple, in which a large, people are talking about $35 billion. Almost the entire gifts that were given to the temple were given by the royal family of Travancore. Not members of the public, but the royal family of Travancore. And the value is 35 billion. What is the value in many of these other temples where millions of people have given gifts? Almost nothing compared to this. Nothing. Where is that money gone? Where are those treasures gone? Is anybody asking? I mean, some people, have been, a friend of mine in Singapore, for example, have been going into this organized theft of idols from temples, organized thefts of so many other things. But does anybody ask these questions? No. It's not, quote unquote, secular to ask about these questions, because anything to do with the Hindu faith, if anything bad is, you can't be secular and then talk about the Hindus and their practices needing to be defended. That's not important. I'm sorry, it is important. Every human being is important. Every faith is important. Even a faith like the Parsi faith, for example, where you have less than 100,000 people and an immensely productive community, frankly. You have a handful of Jewish people in India, but that's a very important faith. For me, it's part of the greatness of India that we still have a few Jewish people who are citizens of India. It's a great thing. So I want to say, frankly, that this is why I'm saying that this concept of discrimination, which is considered to be secularism, this concept is, in my view, not bringing us together, but in a sense, make a danger of us drifting apart. And I would like to say, I have believed all my life in our great civilization, all parts of it, and I do believe in our future, and I do believe that that can only come when there is equal justice under law to everybody. And for that, I'd like to say, I again remind you that these three holy sites need to be brought back to where they were before Aurangzeb had his way with them. And I think that will be a very giant step forward for not Hindu revivalism or extremism, but secularism. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
First, I'd like to sort of engage you in a few questions. We are a sort of a conservative platform, if we were to describe ourselves. And so some people would say right-wing or whatever, but I would just simply say conservative. So I'll start off by, you've presented a very mellow view of Islam, and I'd like to start from there and sort of challenge you from, starting with that. And I'm going to simply read out two verses from Quran.com, chapter 3, 151, verse number 151, and then chapter 9, verse 5. 3:151 says, "We will cast terror into the hearts of those who disbelieve, for what they have associated with Allah, of which He has not set down any authority. And their refuge will be fire, and wretched is the residence of the wrongdoers." 9 verse 5, "And when the sacred months have passed, then kill the polytheists wherever you find them, and capture them and besiege them and sit in wait for them at every place of ambush. But if they should repent, establish prayer, and give zakah, then let them go on their way. Indeed, Allah is forgiving and merciful." There are, I can't say for sure, but people tell me that there are about 600 verses like this, or some say 66. I'm not sure which one is true, which actually go on repeating such things for Jews, Christians, and polytheists. Yes.
Number one, even the Torah, or you have the story of the Mahabharata with a story of war. It was not a non-violent war. It was a war in which people were lost their lives, and it was it's a wonderful thing. And I think every school student in India should study the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, because it basically makes you a good citizen. The Bible, the Old Testament, I think, those who have read the Old Testament, and I'd like to say way back in Calcutta when I was a school student, I won the Scripture Prize. And they were quite surprised that I was not a Christian, but I won the Scripture Prize. There are some pretty strong passages in that. Now, the point is very simple. You have 1.3 billion Muslims in the world. You have nearly 200 million Muslims in India. Now, each of us is a compound of different views and, if I may say so, different tendencies. And the question is, which compound comes to the surface and which does not come to the surface? If you keep insisting that the natural compounds are what you have said, well, then we are headed for a very, as the Chinese say, a very interesting time and a very interesting world. Frankly, very interesting time. I have been always an optimist where human nature is concerned. I've been an optimist where the future of my country is concerned. And I believe that the compounds that will come to the surface in every one of us, irrespective of our faith, is the compound which will promote a certain amount of harmony. So I'd like to say that, yes, there are these verses, but if you go back to almost any of the religious texts and religious books, let me assure you, you will find verses of war, etc., etc. My simple point is this: I'm a practical person. From the very beginning of my life, I've been a private sector person. I have not worked for government for 1 hour of my life. 1 hour. I'm a private sector person. I'm a private individual, and which means I go by ground reality, and I have to go on the basis of facts. If you're in government, whatever you do, whether you do anything or not, you get your salary and you get to boss over people. In the private sector, if you don't succeed, you're gone. You have no salary, you're out of a job. So may I just say that if we want to build India into a superpower, we need a particular kind of society. And we need a society in which certain qualities come to the surface. And one of those qualities is a fierce pride in the whole of Indian history. And that is where I would say, I went long back to meet the president of Indonesia. And I saw Lord Ganesh had been placed there. And I asked, what is this? And they said, yes, because we want to ensure that obstacles are removed. And Ganesha removes obstacles. My wife and I took a walk near a hotel in Washington, and we saw Goddess Saraswati in the Indonesian embassy there. And we asked, what is, you got Goddess Saraswati? Yes, we believe in learning. And we got Goddess Saraswati. Can you imagine what would happen in India if you had Lord Ganesh in South Block? If you had the Goddess Saraswati in an Indian embassy anywhere? Can you imagine the uproar? This is a Muslim country, the world's largest Muslim country. So they're also Muslims. They also read the same Quran. They also read the same verses. And I can, as I said, I again tell you very frankly, look, let me only say something. I am very proud to belong to Sanatana Dharma because I believe it's the most tolerant and accepting of beliefs. I am a proud Sanatani from the time of my birth, and I'm very proud of that. I know whatever happened, but I would only like to say, please understand one thing. Do you want to see a strong, stable country or a country racked in the kind of turmoil that I've seen in Syria, in Libya, in other parts, in the former Yugoslavia and other parts of the world? Please tell me that, because what you're telling me, if this is really what is going to happen. And these are the verses that are going to be actuated. And the verses concerning law, concerning war and bloodshed in the Mahabharata, the verses in the Torah, the verses in the Old Testament, pretty very strong verses, I can tell you, regarding hell and the people who are basically deserving to go to hell and what's going to happen there. Well, we are going to face a very horrible world.
Yeah,
I certainly hope we don't have that kind of world. I believe that we should all together build a strong India. And the best thing that we can do as conservatives would be to ensure a strong India and in a strong world. And again, I say, I applaud Prime Minister Modi, who is very popular in the Middle East, which, by the way, is not a Hindu majority location, in Southeast Asia, which is certainly not Hindu majority, in Europe, which is certainly not Hindu majority. I applaud him for that.
Sure, sir. I hope you're okay to engage a little bit longer.
No problem at all. Most welcome.
Okay, thank you. So first, the equivalence, say, with the Mahabharata war, the issue is not about war, but it is about a perception, an idea of God, which punishes and so on and so forth. That equating, I would call a little bit of a false equivalence, if you don't mind, because I don't think that in any Indian text, there is any faith-based war imposed upon people.
Please allow me to stop and say, I am talking from the point of view of nation building.
Yes,
I'm
I
talking
agree.
from the point of view of philosophy, of scholarship, of libraries, of academic research. Let me tell you, I came into academics from the field. And for a long time, I spent about 15, 16 days on the field. I spent months in the field, for example, tracking extremists in different locations, in different parts of the country, whether it's in Punjab, whether it's in Kashmir, whether it's in Andhra Pradesh. So I'm seeing this from an entirely different point of view from how you're seeing it. So I only want to say that we will be basically talking across each other if we have this kind of a discussion.
No,
You
sir,
may
I
be
have
100% right. You may be completely justified. I may be completely unjustified. I may be totally wrong. I'm quite prepared to say that. But I am looking at it from my perspective, which is building a strong India. And
Yes,
you're
sir.
looking at it from a very philosophical perspective, which again is a very noble perspective and which I respect.
No, not necessarily. I don't think I'm working on the opposite side. I'd like to see absolutely with you on the strong India. The practicality is where what do you do keeping practicality in mind and not having a Syria-like situation? What is the solution is all we are seeking. That is personally my mission also, and I keep bringing speakers to try and find solutions. For example, we brought in people who call themselves Swadeshi Muslims these days. There is a wonderful person who's speaking next week called Muhammad Faiz Khan. And he's trying to, with the RSS, for example, there is this entire Muslim Morcha. And they're basically saying that we want Muslims of India to have pride in their Hinduness, in their cultural Hinduness. Now, the unfortunate part in most of the Muslim discourse in India is that Aurangzeb is Alamgir. And there has not been a greater Muslim than Aurangzeb in India. In fact, Akbar was kufr, just because he started becoming, forthcoming to the Hindus. And it's not that only Aurangzeb brought wrath on the Hindus. It was the entire stream of Mughals, starting from Babur, including Akbar. He may have changed later. The larger point of all of this, and this includes the point about a European Union-like situation. I struggle with this whole idea, if India is only a geography, a piece of land, or is it a set of cultural values? Finally, what is Sanatan Dharma? And if you don't mind, I would like to read out just a very quick line from what Osho used to say. The Bharat keval koi bhukhand nahi hai, na koi rajnaitik ikai, na ऐतिहासिक तथ्यों का कोई टुकड़ा, na dhan, na pad, na pratishtha. And then he goes on to say, Bharat ek abhipsa hai, ek pyas, ek satya ko palene ki, which is the essence of Sanatan Dharma. The endless, fierce pursuit of truth, no matter what it is.
Wonderful. May I only say that I have constantly asked for the Vedic period of our history to be given pride of place in our teaching of history. I've constantly asked for for example, the Panchatantra to be universalized, and I'm really very happy about the new education policy, because for the first time I'm seeing a deliberate fire break from a colonial past. So that's why I welcome this new education policy. In fact, the education minister was kind enough to basically welcome my welcome of that. And I'm welcoming it from my perspective of, as I said, building a strong India. I would only like to say that, look, I'm delighted that you're doing what you're doing. My point is the kind of people you're inviting are not the fringe of Muslims. We should not think of them as the fringe. We should think of them as the majority. And this is the point. So it's a question of, if that is not the case, we should at least try and change that case. I mean, back in 1917, the certain very great leaders saw this Quixotic Wahhabi crusade to basically, remove Ataturk from power and bring in the Sultan as representing the majority of Muslims. I don't think it was the case at all, but it is not. So the question is, how you see a situation and how you deal with the situation. My own belief is, if Vedic teaching is spread across and made universal in our school curricula, along with the other teachings, of course, I can assure you, and again, may I remind you one more thing. I mean, Sanatan Dharma, I can tell you, across the world, believe me, there is such a hunger for, it may not be in that language, there's such a hunger. People are going in for vegetarianism, people are going in for other kinds of things. Believe me, I can tell you, it's a very powerful philosophy. And the great thing is, it doesn't matter what you're called. If you're, in a sense, Sanatani is the core inside you. So I, again, would like to say, please understand one thing. I am entirely focused on, as you correctly said, ensuring that our country remains stable, our country becomes a strong, and I want to end this particular sentence by saying, I would like to see 40 million young Indians, many from the states of UP, Bihar, etc., be trained in warfare, be trained in the military and paramilitary. And ultimately, they have a responsibility to ensure that if there is in any part of the, for example, any kind of tensions or problems or whatever, I would like to see 40 million young Indians trained in that and trained in the martial arts. So believe me, I'm not opposed to martial arts. I'm not opposed to war. And, but as I said, I mean, I look at things in a slightly different way. And because of my travels, I'm acutely aware of the fact that so many societies are a thin line away from bloodshed and chaos. I think our country is not, fortunately, we are much more stable, but that thin line worries me, I can tell you. And you're looking at an individual who in the 1990s wrote in the Times of India and all that India will be a future superpower. I still believe we are going to be a superpower. But I would only like to say that please understand, I am talking in a particular way with a particular intention in mind. And that intention is, one has to, if you read my columns, for example, it's like a Russian doll. You peel away, peel away, peel away, peel away, and peel away, and you find the core meaning. So my request is, whatever the words I'm saying now, peel away, peel away, peel away, and find the core meaning. But again, I repeat, I would like to say, for me, a citizen of India is a citizen of India. Absolutely.
Sure, sir. So, I see that everything is, for you, all your work and the practicality of approach is all focused towards making India a superpower. I completely get that and respect that, hugely. Now, the challenge in my mind, which at least I struggle with, and a whole lot of us perhaps here also struggle with, I asked this question to retired Justice Kehar as well after, just 2 or 3 months after he'd retired and was speaking at a Lal Bahadur Shastri memorial lecture. He talked about secularism at length and how Lal Bahadur Shastri was rooted in secularism. And I asked him while he was walking by, would India remain secular if India were 80% Muslim? If there was a demographic reversal in India, if we were to see a European Union kind of amalgamation of all the Islamic countries on our two sides come together, would India remain? And this brings me to this is tied to the question or the point that I made about Osho when he says India is not a geographic. Even if the territory comes together, if the values do not remain, if India becomes an Islamic country, two questions emanate from there. Is India likely to remain secular? Do you know Justice Kehair what he had to say? He said, we must try because we have walked on this path. It felt like it tore me apart. It felt like as if there is an undo button, that this experiment did not work. Let's undo it now. And then I've brought this point up and challenged a whole lot of people, including, say, Shekhar Gupta sitting next to me in a flight. And he says, well, I agree with you, 54 Islamic countries or however many, none of them are secular. And so if India were to become a Muslim country, it would not have any secular principles at all. It would be a Sharia state. This is Shekhar Gupta. I don't know if after listening to this he may deny it, but that's what he told me. But he refused to believe that there is going to be any demographic reversal at all. Essentially, what all people only bank on is that India must remain secular, but only if it remains Hindu. So, that is my next challenge, and I'd like to hear, your thoughts on it.
No, I would like to say that in my view, the Hindu faith or Sanatani faith is going to become the key faith in the world, the key faith in civilization. And I think that's going to happen. And I think this effort to paint Hindus as some kind of bloody-minded fanatics and narrow-minded people and people who indulge in murder and genocide, etc., and portray Hindus in this kind of awful ways is a way of, in a sense, of a fear that this is happening. And if I may say so, once you educate people in ancient philosophy, for example, and in the ancient greatness, I can assure you, it's a very powerful force across the world. I mean, long back, you're talking about, Shekhar. Long back, a very long back, we went to Dakshineshwar. My mother took me to the Ramakrishna mission there. And then some of the Swamijis came and I was a little kid and we had a discussion there. And there was a gentleman who was asking the same. I'm telling you, we're talking about the 1960s, by the way. And the 1960s, you were not even a concept, frankly. So the point is, the same question, what is going to happen when Muslims come and they're going to multiply and multiply and multiply and Hindus are going to be a minority. Well, what he said was, what the sadhu of the Ramakrishna mission said was, look, Sana, this is a belief system. If the belief is gone, if there are hundreds of millions of people, then it is dead. If the belief is there in 10 people, it will survive, it will grow. Let me tell you one thing. Believe me, I can tell you, you had 13 people leading the Cuban Revolution when they stormed the Moncada barracks, Fidel Castro, and they're still in power in Cuba. You had the Bolshevik party supposed to be the majority party, it is a minority party. They came to power. I can only say the power of an idea, if it is unbound, is immense. And the British took a lot of effort. The Mughals basically took a wrecking ball to the whole thing. The British took a lot of effort in basically, trying to bind this idea. But the idea of the ancient traditions of India, once it is unbound, it becomes a nuclear force. I don't know if you have seen what is called Cherenkov radiation. Go to, a reactor and you look down at the core and you see a very small little blue light. It's a harmless little blue light. It looks like nothing, but that blue light can destroy a city or it can light up a city. That's the radioactive power. And it's been surrounded not by water, but by mud, by dirt, by debris across centuries. And that debris and dirt is what is slowly being removed now. And it is fear of the Cherenkov radiation beneath that debris that is driving this horrible narrative of the government of India and led by the Prime Minister as some people who are completely different. I mean, frankly, if you ask me that I know Narendra Modi, does Narendra Modi know me? Probably not. If he meets me in a room, I think he'll probably not know who the heck I am. He may vaguely remember my name, but he may not connect the name with the face. But I simply want to say that, look, that is why there's such an organized effort against this man, because he is trying to remove that debris and that radioactive force. So for God's sake, don't be diffident. Don't be scared. Don't be nervous. Don't shake and tremble. Work on the power of the idea. Work on removing that debris. Work on revealing that particular light. And I can tell you that is enough.
Yep. So you're basically essentially agreeing that the...
I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with you.
Okay. But
I only say that,
sure.
I am too simple-minded to agree or disagree. Okay. I am only saying I have faith in my country and its civilization. And way back, I mean, if you will check my writing all through, I think you will see that I've been quite unapologetic about it.
No, fair enough. But a Sanatan Renaissance, if you like, is and maybe the only solution to all of this I find is Sanatan Dharma catching on with a little bit of a missionary zeal of Christianity and Islam, and actually being unapologetic about it is as the solution, perhaps.
No, I'm sorry, but you can have Muslims who take on you have a lot of people who say yoga is anti-Muslim. You have a lot of Christians say, oh my God, don't learn yoga, don't learn Sanskrit, it's anti-Muslim. Don't be a vegetarian.
Californian state, for example. California.
But I'm saying, please, I don't go by these categories, frankly. I look at the core and I see a human core. And I see a human core that can be powerfully influenced and affected by the powerful influence of the light that is deep inside our tradition.
First of all, namaste, sir, and it is really nice to have you on Sangam Talks. Sir, I have two questions. So my first question is that in the start of your lecture, you talked about expansion of Islam in several regions, not because of sword, but as an instrument of horizontal equality. So, sir, I wanted to know specifically, what do you prefer to call these classifications within Islam? For example, we have Ashrafs, Ajlafs, Arjals, which is a sort of racial classification. And then by and large, we have 72 sects in Islam, which definitely not friendly to each other. And then we have inner classification based on fitnas, which is based on selective traditions in Islam, like Barelvi, Devbandi, Tablighis, etc., etc. So how do you see these classifications? Are they horizontal? Are they vertical? Or are they something else?
Well, I'd like to say that they are most likely, many of them what you describe are vertical. And I'd like to say from the very beginning that if you look at the theology of Islam, essentially it means that every believer should only basically base his or her knowledge of the faith by directly going to the words of the Holy Quran. Ever since then, you've got a lot of hadith, you have a lot of interpretations, you have a lot of these things that have come, and frankly, these are not really Islamic. For example, you have a lot of preachers who say, you want to go to paradise? This is how you go to paradise. Look, as I have read the particular theology, and I'd like to say I've read multiple theologies. For example, the Jewish theology, there's so much of congruence between ancient Hindu theology and Jewish theology. It's amazing. There's so much of congruence between the theology of the Incas and a lot of the practices of the Hindu theology. But I'd like to say that it is the most blasphemous thing to say that you as a human being can tell me or any other person the way to the path to paradise, the path to heaven, and say that if you don't do this, you'll go to hell. Because that is something which in the Quran is reserved for when you go there and you face them, and then the decision is taken by one force alone and nobody else has got that right. So a lot of what you're talking now is actually by the theology of Islam, un-Islamic. And the reality is, I'm happy about one thing. And I'm happy about that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is now finally reacted against Wahhabism. And a very important modification he's doing. He is now, in a sense, de-Wahhabizing a lot of the literature. Again, I stress, in this theology, as I understand it, and I'd like to say that I have understood it basically from from translations and not from the original Arabic. I don't speak Arabic, but even the translation is very clear. Any individual who says that we know what to do for you to be a good Muslim, we know that if you do this, you go to heaven. If you do this, you go to hell. That person is committing the worst form of blasphemy. But to what is happening across the world, that person is taken as an exemplar of Islam. Is basically taken as a great Islamic scholar. So this is what I'm fighting against, that you have to understand correctly all these different things, including, for example, the basic tenet of the philosophy, which is nobody knows who's going to be sent to heaven and who's going to be sent to hell, and nobody even knows if it's going to be somebody who believes a person is Muslim or not. There's nothing there which talks about that. It's a question of doing certain things, not doing certain things, but the decision is taken there. So I only want to say, Avinash, a lot of things are going on, a lot of interpretations are there, a lot of words are there, but I'd like to stick to my very simplistic, maybe, to my very basic, maybe, kind of thing, because frankly, if I'd like to say that, in my view, we need to have that kind of an approach, because as I said, we have to live with the realities. And the good news is, even Saudi Arabia now is now turning against Wahhabism. That's a very, very good sign. And again, I repeat, the excellent relations India has got with so many Islamic countries, including Indonesia and Saudi Arabia, is a very, very good sign. So I'm only saying, Avinash, all that you say is very true. And it applies to a lot of people in a lot of faiths. But I'm only saying, my way of looking at things is slightly different. And pardon me, but I would like to stick to my view.
I have two small comments. I'll request you to elaborate on them. One, we have been saying, or I find a lot of people, including you, saying, I am secular. Well, why should I say I'm secular? I am secular. I don't have to say I'm secular when I am secular. I don't have to prove to anybody that I'm secular in any way, because I am one. Now, yes, it makes me feel, it's a way of saying that I am defensive. Somebody says, you're not secular, so I got to keep on saying I'm secular. I don't have to prove anything to anybody else. In fact, it's time we started telling the other guy, you are not being secular, you are saying things and doing things which you should not do. I think it's time we started saying that you are not secular and stop saying I am secular. And when you give your personal experience of your mother, I think you, of all people, are probably the most secular I have not seen in ages. So I don't see why you should even say that.
I would only like to say I completely agree with your point of view. Very frankly, when I use the word secular, what I mean is the people who call them secular are not secular. That's all. I'm differentiating myself from them. So as you are, in a sense. And, yes, I'm not being defensive at all, frankly. I'm very proud of who I am. I'm very proud of whatever it is. And I would only like to say that, I fully agree with what you say and your point of view. And I stand with that. When I say I'm secular, what I mean is you are not secular, not you, but the kind of people you're talking about, phony secularism, pseudo-secularism, you are not secular. So my language is sometimes a little different. It's sometimes a little, if I may say so, maybe a bit whatever. It's not as direct as military language, which is extremely direct. But I would only like to say that I fully agree with your point of view. I don't think there's any reason for anybody to defend. So, for example, anybody who appreciates the Hindu faith or Sanatan Dharma, I don't see any reason to be defensive about that at all. For a long time, people, used to say, oh my God, I remember, I don't want to talk about it, but during the 10 years of a particular government, what used to happen was that there was an effort to identify civil servants who used to wear a tikka on their forehead. and you used to visit temples more than once a month. If you went to a temple 2 or 3 times a month and you used to wear a tikka on your forehead, well, then you were identified as a quote unquote BJP RSS fanatic. I hardly go to temples, frankly. My wife goes to all the temples that she makes up, more than makes up for both of us. But this is ridiculous. That you visit temples more than once a month, and so you're not secular. By their definition, you're a BJP person, you're an RSS person, and one invisible black mark is put on your record so that you don't get the good postings, you don't get your promotion. This is absurd. So these are the kind of people, unfortunately, who have done so much harm to the social fabric in this country. And I would like to say, I fully basically agree with your point of view that they have to be challenged. And they're on the defensive now. And I'm saying that I'm delighted that they're on the defensive. And they're on the defensive because today we have a prime minister who is unapologetic about saying who he is. And a country that is largely unapologetic about being itself. And again, I'd like to say I'm optimistic because I think, that I think we are, despite a lot of the errors or whatever, we are definitely heading towards that superpower kind of thing. But again, for the 4th time, let me say, I fully share your view. And when I say I'm secular, what I mean is you, that is the other person who is basically tossing things at me, is not secular.
Sir, actually, I'm confused with your definition of secularism. So I have just 2 quick questions. First thing, some book in chapter 4 explains how to kill the animals and how to select the animal killing. It's a very sacred book, so you might know. And then the same kind of killing created problem between the Rohingya Muslim and Buddhist. And this problem is in India also. So how you think this kind of contradictory thing, means killing any animal which have to live on this planet for just 5 or 10 years and human has to live 70 years, you think it's justified from angle of secularism? And my second question is, why only 3 temples are fitting your perspective of secularism, not all, which was destroyed by the invaders? Thank you, sir. These are 2 questions.
Coming to the second point, I think, frankly, I think these 3 are the 3 holy sites. And I think that is why they are so very important. Somnath, of course, already was rebuilt, thank God. But these are the 3 holy sites that are left. Ayodhya is now being rebuilt. Other 2 are being rebuilt. And so far as you're coming, look, I'm a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian right from the beginning of my life. And that is because my father's mother, she was very insistent that I should be a vegetarian. And follow the traditions of her husband, the late C.V. Subramania Iyer, and follow his tradition. So my mother's family used to eat fish, but not meat or anything. So she used to watch like a hawk over me and make sure that I did not take any fish or anything. Out of my love for her, I can tell you, I have remained a vegetarian all my life. I don't believe in killing animals or anybody and anything else. But the reality is, Alok, you can't do this through legislation. Let me be frank with you. You can't remove alcohol through legislation. You can't remove certain other ways of things through legislation. You can only do it through, conscientization. So it's, it becomes a shortcut. हाँ तो हम ये करना है तो हम क्या करना है अरे वे तो एक लॉ पास करेगा तो हम लॉबी करेगा लॉ पास करेगा और आराम करेगा. The fact is, very well no one's going to follow that, but still you are fooling yourself, or not even fooling yourself. My point is, Alok, that this is a personal judgment, and in my personal view, I believe any kind of meat or whatever eating is bad. But if somebody else has a different point of view, I'm not going to say that person is the devil and that person is bad or whatever. And so far as these particular things you talked about, killing and all that, well, I'm not an expert on this kind of thing, so I can't say anything. I can only say that I'm quite happy with my vegetarian diet, and I have never seen any reason to change that. That's all.
Sir, my second question is that in your talk, you basically tried to condense Islamic extremism to one denomination, which is Wahhabism. But if you look at the facts, the story is entirely different. And let me give you a few insights about it. that Sufism, which is regarded as the most peaceful version of Islam, has its own bloody history, and we have plenty of literature in public domain. And then we have this recent PU research conducted on several Islamic nations, including Asia, Africa, and Middle East region. And the outcome of that survey was truly shocking. In short, majority of Muslims, almost 65%, either remain silent on the heinous crimes of ISIS or found supporting them. And the third trend, which is noticeable here, is that the prominent voices among Islamic apologists who are busy in covering up ugly side of Islam are surprisingly from South Asia. They are not Arabic, like Zakir Naik, Muhammad Hijab, Maulana Maududi, Tariq Jamil, Anjem Chaudhry, who have enjoyed following in masses. So it was not basically Arabs, but South Asians who are at the forefront of concretizing this Islamic extremist ideology. And sir, I have personal experience also. I came from Aligarh Muslim University. I've spent 7 years in Aligarh Muslim University. And when this 9/11 attack happened, then a conspiracy theory broke out that it was basically a Jewish conspiracy. So, and this was widely taken in Aligarh Muslim University as well. In fact, in my law faculty, there were 5 seminars conducted on this issue, that it was actually a Jewish conspiracy, and very eminent professors have participated in that meeting. So my question is, sir, that on what basis you are drawing this line of distinction between fringe and mainstream? I mean, keeping in mind all these facts, I am not be able to figure out who is fringe and who is mainstream.
Avinash, as I told you, let me tell you, if you're in the private sector, you look at the bottom line. I mean, if what you're telling me, I mean, do you sleep at night? Or do you spend the whole night worried and upset and scared that something terrible is going to happen to the country? I don't know if you sleep at night, because frankly, I mean, it's a terrifying kind of thought that what you're saying, that you've got hundreds of millions of people who are, in a situation where, I mean, anything can happen. So I don't really like to say, Avinash, that you have a right to your point of view, and I have a right to my point of view. It's different, but I would only like to say, if you identify this kind of thing as the mainstream, and then more and more people believe it's the mainstream, and that is what has happened today. The only people who come on television screens are people like what you described. I mean, Zakir Naik and Anjem Chaudhry and all, some of us have been calling for them to be arrested long back and sent to jail long back. It's never happened, unfortunately. But it's, I mean, even today, they're all running around the place. And I think Anjem Chaudhry just got off or something. But the reality of situation is, please, when I'm talking about the mainstream, it's important to understand that this is the healthy mainstream that is there. And if you talk about the mainstream as the fringe, then the fringe is advantaged and starts increasing within the mainstream. So if that is going to happen, it's going to be difficult to sleep at night. So, Avinash, I look at things in a very practical, realpolitik way. Please understand that. I don't look at it in an emotional way. And you're talking about your experience in Aligarh Muslim University. Allow me to say that, my wife and I, when we were in Kashmir once, there was a grenade that was tossed into our hotel room. And luckily for us, the grenade kept on sparking and whatever, and a lot of smoke came, but it did not explode. And later on, I found out it was a Chinese grenade. Thank God, it did not explode. So, I mean, we've all got personal experiences like that. And there's another experience also, which I'm not going to talk about because whatever. But so we've all gone through this kind of experience at the hands of fanatics. And I can assure you, every few weeks, I get some call from here or there or whatever it is, and saying we're going to do this, we're going to do that, because I've been abusing the Wahhabis and the Khomeinists for about nearly 40 years now, I can tell you. Nearly 40 years. And they don't seem to like me very much. So all I can say, Avinash, I mean, you have a right to your point of view, but please understand, when you're looking at building up India, and you're looking at building up society, it's very important that to say that this is good health. We know what good health is, right? We're not going to call a sick person, healthy. So this is what the mainstream should be in every faith, and say this is the mainstream. And if you say no, this is this is not the mainstream. This is only a small section. The mainstream is actually the fringe. You're actually helping the people whom you claim to be fighting against. So please understand, as a military person will tell you, tactics and strategy have got to be fashioned in such a way that ultimately the idea is victorious. And the idea is the idea of India, as India is over so many thousands and thousands of years.
See, Kerala is the place which was from people like Shankara who transformed Hinduism from Kaladi to Kasha. And now, if you look at the situation, what is happening in Kerala is totally nothing. And even in places like Kannur, and I was in Hajj giving the sermon streets, and situation not as it used earlier. And since you are a person who with the ground to the ear, and your prediction have been accurate in the couple of previous years, where do you see Kerala in maybe next 15 years from a social standpoint?
See, पहला बात ये है कि देखो, मेरा जो वोटर कार्ड है वो हरियाणा का है, तो मैं एक वोटर कार्ड के आप देख लेंगे तो मैं एक हरियाणवी हूँ, मलयाली तो नहीं, मैं हरियाणवी हूँ. दूसरा, I mean, but the other thing I'd like to say, in the 1970s, people used to talk about Kerala being a hotbed of Maoism, Naxalism, extremism, and you had, Kunikal Narayanan and others, and you had this kind of, the Naxalite movement grew there and all that. And all of a sudden, it suddenly collapsed. The Naxalite movement collapsed. It was not because of the police or not because of any of the police action. It was because there was a boom in the price of oil, and all the Naxalites said, forget about, killing people and going to the jungle. Let's all go to the Gulf and make money. You understand? So frankly, I would like to see India take off as a knowledge economy. I would like to see us develop artificial intelligence systems. I'd like to see young people develop apps that can make them super rich. We don't have a Google. We don't have a Yahoo. We don't have a Twitter. We could easily have that if we have an ecosystem here for that kind of thing. So please remember, 1970s, Naxalism collapsed in Kerala because of the Gulf boom. If you have a similar kind of boom, I can tell you, this particular fanaticism will also collapse. There are a handful of people who are very affluent and very wealthy and who are highly motivated. These people have got to be identified and they have to be separated and they have to be dealt with. But overall, I can tell you, we need a minimum of 9% growth as a precondition for creating the condition for social stability. We need 11, 12, 13% growth over a generation. And that is the focus that we need to work on. If that happens, I can tell you, these issues are not going to be a serious problem. They are not going to be. Why? Because in a modern economy, I mean, you look at, for example, why is it there is absolutely no innovation in the world where you have this kind of fanatic behavior? No innovation at all. No discovery. Nothing. Why is it? Because that mindset is different. And the mindset, which is the Sanatani mindset, a broad-minded, you go to San Jose, for example. I mean, you'll think you're in India. I get invited to give a talk there, and when I face the audience, it's very difficult to find somebody who's not an Indian. They're all Indians, and of course they're all Americans and they're all Indians. So the fact of the matter is, let me say, economic growth is what is important. For economic growth, you need an amount of societal stability. I again reiterate to this very important forum that needs pride in the country, pride in our tradition, pride in our civilization. The same pride that Indonesians have got in the Ramayana, the same pride that Indonesians have got in Lord Ganesh or Goddess Saraswati. We need that pride, because let's not get religious labels on them. These are essentially labels which have been put to prevent people from accessing them, including many Hindus. The Ramayana and the Mahabharata should not be seen as texts of a religion. They are to be seen as edicts of a civilization. If the Romans are proud of Roman past, the Greeks are proud of the Grecian past, why can't we be proud of our past? The Egyptians are very proud of the Egyptian past. They're very proud of that. They're very proud of the ancient civilization of Egypt. Why can't we be proud of that? So I'm only making this very simple point. We have such a lot to be proud about. And this pride will unlock the energy inside us, will unlock that Cherenkov radiation, will remove this dirt. Education is the key to that. And this new education policy is a very important beginning to that. And what is a beginning now is, if I may say so, the whole of Indian culture has stood up. On 1st October 1949, Mao Zedong is supposed to have said, China has stood up. Let me say that today, Indian culture and civilization has stood up. And if it has stood up, I can tell you, nothing can halt it. Whether you're a Hindu or a Muslim or a Christian or a Sikh, they'll all be part of this standing up of Indian culture and civilization, because everybody has a right to that culture and civilization.